Ellen DeGeneres had interviewed guests of all ages throughout her decades-long career, from precocious children sharing remarkable talents to centenarians offering life wisdom, but nothing could have prepared her for the afternoon, when what seemed like a routine conversation about aging gracefully and lifelong learning would evolve into one of the most mystifying and emotionally profound experiences she had ever encountered. What started as an interview about maintaining youthful spirit in later years became an inexplicable journey through time itself, where the boundaries between young and old, teacher and student, wisdom and wonder, began to blur in ways that challenged everything Ellen understood about age, maturity, and the nature of human development. It was a golden Thursday afternoon at the Ellen Studios, and the atmosphere was warm and reflective as they prepared for what was scheduled to be an inspiring episode celebrating lifelong learning, creative aging, and the wisdom that comes with accumulated life experience. Ellen, wearing a sophisticated coral blazer over navy pants, was looking forward to interviewing Eleanor Hartwell, a remarkable 87-year-old woman whose recent decision to pursue a doctoral degree in art history at Yale University had captured national attention and inspired people of all ages to reconsider their assumptions about learning and growth in later life. Eleanor's story was exactly the kind of uplifting narrative that Ellen loved to feature, someone who had raised 5 children, worked as a high school teacher for 40 years, and then, after retiring and losing her husband of 60 years, had decided to fulfill her lifelong dream of studying Renaissance art at the highest academic level. According to her preliminary materials, Eleanor was thriving in her doctoral program, had already published 2 scholarly articles, and was serving as an inspiration to both her fellow students and her professors who were decades younger than she was. "Our next guest proves that it's never too late to chase your dreams," Ellen announced to the appreciative studio audience. At 87 years old, she's pursuing a PhD at Yale University, showing us all that age is just a number when it comes to learning and growing. Her story reminds us that curiosity and passion don't have expiration dates. Please welcome Dr. Eleanor Hartwell. The audience erupted in warm, encouraging applause as Eleanor walked onto the stage with graceful, confident steps. She was an elegant woman with silver hair styled in a classic bob, wearing a sophisticated burgundy suit that suggested both academic seriousness and personal style. What struck Ellen most was the remarkable vitality in Eleanor's eyes, not the forced energy of someone trying to seem younger than their years, but the genuine spark of intellectual curiosity and life engagement that transcended any numerical age. "Eleanor, welcome to the show," Ellen said warmly as they embraced gently. "Thank you, dear. This is quite an adventure for someone my age," Eleanor replied, her voice carrying the measured cadence and slight formality typical of someone from her generation who had spent decades teaching young people. "Tell us about your decision to go back to school at 87. What inspired you to pursue a PhD?" Eleanor's expression became animated as she began sharing her story. "Well, Ellen, after my dear husband Harold passed away 3 years ago, I found myself with time and energy that I had never had while raising children and working full-time. I had always been fascinated by Renaissance art, particularly the works of female artists who have been overlooked by traditional scholarship." "That's incredible. How do your classmates react to having an 87-year-old colleague?" "Oh, the young people are wonderful," Eleanor said with obvious affection. "At first they were quite formal with me, calling me ma'am, and offering to carry my books, but now they treat me like any other graduate student, which is exactly what I wanted." As Eleanor spoke, Ellen noticed something subtle but unusual beginning to occur. Eleanor's formal, measured speaking style seemed to be loosening slightly, and her posture was becoming more relaxed and animated. "Eleanor, what's the most challenging part of being back in an academic environment?" "Well, the technology is quite different from what I'm used to," Eleanor said. But her voice had taken on a slightly more casual tone, and she gestured with her hands in a way that seemed less formal than when she had first sat down. "The other students are always on their computers and phones. Sometimes I feel like I'm learning a whole new language just to communicate with them." Ellen was intrigued by the subtle shift in Eleanor's demeanor. "How do you keep up with the coursework and research demands?" "It's challenging, But also exhilarating, Eleanor replied, and Ellen noticed that her vocabulary and sentence structure were becoming noticeably less formal. I mean, like, there's so much information available now that wasn't accessible when I was younger. It's kind of overwhelming, but also really cool. Ellen paused, struck by Eleanor's use of phrases like kind of and really cool, language that seemed inconsistent with the formal, educated woman who had walked onto the stage just minutes earlier. Eleanor, forgive me for asking, but are you feeling all right? You seem to be expressing yourself differently than when we started talking. Eleanor looked confused for a moment, then smiled with what appeared to be increased spontaneity. I feel great. Actually, I feel better than I have in years. Being around all those young students, all that energy and excitement about learning, it's like I'm remembering what it felt like to be young myself. As Eleanor spoke, Ellen began experiencing an unusual sensation herself. She felt a growing sense of responsibility and gravitas that seemed disproportionate to the light-hearted nature of their conversation. It was as if the weight of years and accumulated wisdom was settling on her shoulders. Eleanor, this might sound strange, but I'm feeling unusually mature right now. Like I suddenly understand things about life that I didn't understand a few minutes ago. Eleanor actually giggled, in response to Ellen's observation. That's funny. I was just thinking that I feel more curious and excited than I have in decades. It's like I'm seeing everything with fresh eyes. Ellen felt increasingly perplexed as she recognized that something inexplicable was happening between them. Eleanor's entire demeanor was continuing to shift toward something that could only be described as youthful, while Ellen felt herself becoming more contemplative and serious. Eleanor, when you look at your life now compared to when you were younger, what do you see? Everything seems possible again, Eleanor exclaimed with enthusiasm that would have been more typical of someone a quarter of her age. When I was younger, when I was middle-aged, I felt like I had to be so responsible and serious all the time. Now I feel like I can just explore and learn and try new things without worrying about what people think. Ellen felt a profound sadness settling over her as she contemplated the weight of responsibility and the passage of time. Eleanor, doesn't it make you sad to think about all the years that have passed, all the opportunities that might have been missed? Eleanor looked at Ellen with surprise and concern. Why would I be sad about that? Every year has brought me something valuable. I had wonderful experiences raising my children, teaching students, building a life with Harold. Now I get to have different wonderful experiences. Why focus on what's past when there's so much ahead? Ellen felt tears forming in her eyes as she was overwhelmed by a sudden understanding of mortality and the preciousness of time. But Eleanor, don't you worry about running out of time? About not being able to do everything you want to do? Oh, honey, Eleanor said, reaching over to take Ellen's hand with the spontaneous affection of someone much younger. Time isn't something you run out of. It's something you live inside of. Every moment is complete in itself. I'm not worried about the future because I'm too busy being amazed by right now. Ellen looked at Eleanor and saw something that seemed impossible, an 87-year-old woman who was somehow radiating the wonder, optimism, and spontaneous joy of someone discovering the world for the first time. Eleanor, I have to ask you something that might sound crazy. Do you feel like you're getting younger during our conversation? Eleanor paused and considered the question seriously. You know what? I do feel different. I feel like I'm remembering what it was like to be excited about everything, to think that anything could happen. Is that what you mean by younger? Yes. That's exactly what I mean, Ellen replied, feeling simultaneously amazed and burdened by her growing awareness of life's complexity and fragility. And I feel like I'm aging in real time, gaining decades of perspective and understanding that I didn't have when we started talking. Eleanor bounced slightly in her chair with excitement. That's so cool. Do you think we're like trading ages or something? Like in a fairy tale? Ellen was struck by Eleanor's increasingly youthful vocabulary and mannerisms, while she felt herself becoming more philosophical and contemplative. Eleanor, what do you remember about being young the first time? Everything seemed magical, Eleanor said with wonder. Every day held the possibility of adventure or discovery. I thought I could become anyone, do anything. The world felt infinite and full of surprises. Ellen felt a deep ache of recognition and loss. And now you feel that way again? More than ever. Ellen, getting older has taught me that magic is real. It's just different from what we expect when we're kids. The magic isn't in getting what you want, it's in discovering what you didn't know you wanted. Ellen turned to address the audience, feeling the weight of profound responsibility. Folks, I'm experiencing something I can't explain. I feel like I'm seeing life from the perspective of someone much older and wiser than I am, while Eleanor seems to be rediscovering the wonder of youth. She looked back at Eleanor with deep seriousness. Eleanor, if you could tell young people something about aging, what would it be? I'd tell them that getting older isn't about losing things, Eleanor said with the enthusiasm and clarity of someone making a great discovery. It's about gaining permission to be yourself without apology. When you're young, you're so worried about what other people think. When you get older, you realize that what other people think doesn't matter nearly as much as what you think about yourself. Ellen felt overwhelmed by the wisdom in Eleanor's words, and by her own sudden understanding of life's deeper meanings. Eleanor, what about the fear of death? How do you handle knowing that time is limited? Eleanor laughed with genuine delight. Death isn't scary when you're living fully. It's like being afraid of going to sleep when you're having a wonderful day. The day doesn't become less wonderful because you know it will end. It becomes more wonderful because you know it's precious. Ellen felt tears streaming down her face as she was hit by the profundity of Eleanor's perspective. Eleanor, you're teaching me things about life that I never understood before. And you're reminding me of what it feels like to discover those things for the first time, Eleanor replied with joy. Isn't this amazing? We're sharing different kinds of wisdom. Your fresh perspective and my experienced perspective. As the interview continued, Ellen found herself asking increasingly deep questions about meaning, purpose, and the nature of human existence, while Eleanor responded with growing enthusiasm and wonder, as if each philosophical concept were a delightful puzzle to explore. Eleanor, what do you think is the purpose of life? To pay attention, Eleanor exclaimed with the excitement of someone who had just solved a riddle, to notice how beautiful everything is, to be kind to people, to learn new things, to create something that wasn't there before. It's not complicated. We just make it complicated by overthinking it. Ellen felt the weight of Eleanor's wisdom settling into her bones. And what about regret? How do you handle the things you wish you had done differently? Regret is just love with nowhere to go, Eleanor said with sudden gentleness. When I miss Harold, when I wish I had been more patient with my children, when I think about opportunities I didn't take, that pain is actually love trying to express itself. So I try to honor the regret by loving more fully now. Ellen was quiet for a long moment, overwhelmed by the depth of understanding she was experiencing. Eleanor, I feel like this conversation has aged me decades. I understand things now that I didn't understand an hour ago. And I feel like I'm seeing everything with new eyes, Eleanor replied. It's like we're sharing our perspectives across time. 3 months later, Ellen received a letter from Eleanor that made her smile through tears. Eleanor had completed her first year of doctoral studies with highest honors and had been invited to present her research at an international conference on Renaissance art. More significantly, Eleanor wrote that their conversation had reminded her that learning wasn't just about accumulating knowledge, it was about maintaining wonder. 6 months later, Ellen invited Eleanor back to the show for a follow-up interview. The age reversal phenomenon didn't occur again, but both women carried something from their first encounter. Eleanor retained some of the youthful wonder she had rediscovered, while Ellen maintained a deeper sense of wisdom and perspective about life's meaning and preciousness. What that experience taught me, Ellen reflected months later, is that age isn't linear. We carry all the ages we've ever been inside us, and sometimes the right conversation can help us access wisdom we didn't know we had, or wonder we thought we had lost. The episode became a landmark moment for discussions about aging, wisdom, and the fluid nature of human development across the lifespan. Eleanor showed me that getting older doesn't mean losing youth, it means adding depth to youth, Ellen would say in subsequent interviews. And sometimes the youngest perspective comes from someone who has lived long enough to remember what really matters. Because sometimes the most profound learning happens when we encounter someone who reminds us that wisdom and wonder aren't opposites. They're partners in the dance of a fully lived life. And sometimes the greatest gift we can offer each other is the permission to be both the child we were and the elder we're becoming.